Hi, everybody. I know what you're thinking. He's alive. It's been 2 weeks and he hasn't killed Warren Ellis. What's going on? Well, I'll tell you, this isn't the last. You haven't heard the last from me when it comes to the subject of Warren Ellis. But I'm here to announce the start of a new project. Project that I'm going to weave in with my usual random stuff because I wanted this to be random stuff. I don't want audience capture, at least not yet. This catastrophic health crisis I had. It was funny. I had so much free time, but I was so depressed I couldn't make these videos. And then I made two. And then I kind of stopped again. But now I feel comfortable in a situation where my life has stabilized enough that, I figure if I'm going to go after Warren Ellis for a 22-year-old forum post, and wait till you hear about me going after what I'm going to do to Steve Wacker, um, I might as well do something that I've always wanted to do and discuss a 25-year-old television series that nobody remembers except the actors involved, who, two in particular, loved it, and I think in just by impression of talking about it, consider it their peak of their careers and the material in terms of material they had to play. A series that won several Saturn Awards, and if you know what Saturn Awards, that would mean something, but nobody knows what Saturn Awards are. And that is CBS's Now and Again. Created by Glenn Gordon Caron, who's mostly, well, he is probably one of the more unconventional show creators, showrunners. He's best known for two series. One is Moonlighting, which everyone loved, including me, until these days. Moonlighting is simultaneously one of the best shows ever created and one of the most unbearable, impossible shows to watch 40 years after its creation. There was nothing like it on at the time, but to say it's aged badly is a massive understatement. And then the second most popular series he ever created was Medium, which was about Patricia Arquette and Jake Weber. It was a typical CBS, well, it started on NBC, but it felt like a CBS show that somehow wandered onto NBC, and then its last two seasons it wandered onto CBS. uh, Loosely based on the experiences of Texan psychic Alison Dubois. Although, if I were Dubois, I would kind of be insulted by the series a little bit because it. But that's another that's another story. And that was about a woman who worked as a psychic for the local prosecutor's office and featured. But what was interesting about the series, as much as it was about the typical procedural stuff, and it was actually, I mean, there's a particularly good funny episode early on where Kelsey Grammer, who was a producer, showed up as the killer, and it was one of his most weirdly funny performances he's ever done. And there wasn't really a lot to what clearly animated Karen as creator and showrunner was the fact that her husband, played by Jake Weber, who I think if there's an actor who was put on this earth to play the husband of the Patricia Arquette character, it's Jake Weber, because that's what he wanted to really examine with the series. What a marriage would be like. What if you were married to a woman who could see visions of villainous acts, and you were a guy who was pretty much a rational dude and actually worked in the sciences? And the show, I thought, was actually fairly dull, but you could understand why it lasted so long, because what Arquette and Weber were so great with each other. In fact, Patricia Arquette has made noises about possibly wanting to continue the series, which, given how it ended, which would probably be, Medium ends in a very what probably sounded on, it kind of ends like Battlestar Galactica did. Battlestar Galactica ends in a way that when if you write it on paper, you're like, okay, that's a great way to end it. And then you watch and you're like, I hate every moment of this. And that's kind of how Medium ends. And Patricia Arquette, has made noises about, I would love to do 13 more numbers. I love, and the best justification is to say that ending happened, but it didn't. Let me just say it that way. There's a way, basically, we should do a revival of Medium because it would be one of the funniest things ever if we try if they retcon the original series ending. But I'm going to move on from that. And then Mr. Caron is unfortunately did what he's currently remembered for. It's funny. I've never actually seen a full episode of this series. It ran for 6 or 7 years. But at the end of it, now he didn't create it, but at the end of its first season, Caron wound up show running the series Bull, which was a Dr. Phil inspired series starring Michael Weatherly as a jury consultant. Which jury consultants are kind of characters that other lawyer shows make fun of. One of the best early episodes of The Good Wife is an episode where they hire a jury consultant and it goes completely wrong. That's kind of like I was never into it, even though, Michael Weatherly is a fun actor to watch. But I'm gonna try to speed run through this because, basically actress Eliza Dushku showed up in the last couple episodes of the season. CBS was pleased enough with her that they wanted to write her into the show as a regular for next season. And what happened was, now Eliza Dushku is a woman who's been sober for over 15 years. She spent a lot of her time dealing with substance abuse issues she's spoken about abuse she once suffered on the set of a film from about particularly the film True Lies. And I don't really care what you have to say about that, James Cameron. You're a fucking tyrant. I fully believe you allowed that to happen. And there was apparently, Weatherly said, you want to split a champagne bottle with me? And Dushku said, I don't do that. That would hurt my sobriety, basically. And people say it's sexual harassment. Well, not what he was doing, but he was like, this is a 40-year-old man, and a woman is patiently explaining to you, look, I don't party. That's not who I am. I appreciate it. Could you just leave it? And no, he's caught on tape making fun of her for something she simply doesn't want to do. And eventually, and hearing this, in the middle of all this, Caron simply wrote Joshua's character out of the show in the first season finale. Against the wishes of CBS, he went over their heads. And then then there was a lawsuit which gave Dushku, based on statements based on the evidence collected, it was determined that Dushku had a case for wrongful termination, and CBS wound up paying her $9 million. And she left the industry. And if you can Google it, she's actually become a licensed therapist, started a family, and I just keep thinking, but there's this parent quote that's been attributed to Gordon Caron. I don't want to slander him too much because I love Now and Again, but by the time I'm finished talking about it, he's not going to like me. because I have a lot to say. But there was a point where his response to Dushku's protest, well, she was in Maxim. Who cares? She was in Maxim 15 years ago, dude. It just it just amazed me that a guy who is beloved by actors for the material he makes, like he hears one actor complain about something, and what I feel is a justified complaint is response, and he thinks everybody's Sybil Shepherd or Bruce Willis being difficult again. And I'm just very disappointed. And then what happened? And then something happened in the penultimate season of Bull. Basically, CBS started noticing half the writers. Now, Caron has been very upfront that he does not run a show like it shows typically run. Now, there are guys who will swear by him, like experienced, talented guys like Rene Echevarria, for one thing. And put him back on Star Trek, please. But in what would turn out to be the sixth season of Bull, CBS apparently called him into their office one day and said, "Glenn, half the writers have quit. Maybe you're the problem." And that was pretty much it for Glenn Gordon Caron. According to the IMDb, he's not attached to anything. His Wikipedia doesn't say anything. I mean, obviously, if he's smart, he probably has enough money that he doesn't need to work in television or even do a movie anymore. I mean, part of the reason Now and Again exists was that while his film career started out extremely promisingly with the movie Clean and Sober with Michael Keaton, and people are always kind of like, well, why did they choose Michael Keaton for Batman? I was like, have you sat down and watched that movie? Clean and Sober is not a particularly unique movie. It is very much, this is what cocaine can do to you. I mean, it's not, like, basically it's the boost with a happy ending is kind of a way to talk about it. It's very much it's a very didactic, a guy has to go into rehab or go to jail because a woman used with overdoses. And it's about the 12 steps. It's about getting your first coin. And it's plot wise, it's paint by numbers, but in terms of execution, it's extremely well done. And it changed Michael Keaton's career forever. And it's completely forgotten, which I think is kind of weird. And then Caron also made a couple other movies, but by the time Now and Again rolled around, he made Picture Perfect, which is actually not a bad rom-com. It was just during the flood of like, oh, let's put an actor from Friends in a movie. And people seemed really not into that. And like Jennifer Aniston, it has one of my favorite, and it's not a great rom-com, but it has what I think considered definitely my favorite rom-com endings of all time. And that's kind of the point I want to make here. Like, I think Glenn Gordon Caron is a dick, but I also think Glenn Gordon Caron has given me some of my favorite moments in TV and movies. And there's also another film, a film which, quite frankly, you really have to watch because you don't even believe it could possibly have existed, called Wilder Napalm, which is a movie about Deborah Winger and Arliss Howard fucking. And then Dennis Quaid shows up and he starts throwing fireballs at them. And that's not the weirdest thing about the movie. But we're here to I actually am probably going to talk about Wilder Napalm on its own on this channel. But I'm here to talk about Now and Again. I've wasted 15 minutes of your time just prelimming it. But people ask me, so what is Now and Again? If you ask Glenn Gordon Caron, he would say, it's basically my take on Damn Yankees, which, if you've watched the show, is a complete lie. There is nothing about the setup of Now and Again other than the Joe figure yearning for his family that remotely resembles what Damn Yankees is, or what the year the Yankees lost the pennant is. I mean, I've been in Damn Yankees. I've seen Damn Yankees. It's a good reference point, but this isn't a series about a guy who makes a deal with the devil with an escape clause. This is a series of a guy who's given an opportunity, do this or die, and then things kind of, and then he does you have a choice: A, do this for us, or B, die. He chooses A, obviously, because but he can't, but of course he can't, stay away from his family, which is what is interesting about the series. So much of it is based on a rickety scale, but it's based on rickety thinking. And yet at the same time, it's so beautifully made and fun to watch. And I honestly think the first three-parter is some of the best pre 24. Like, I really think 24 is another one of my favorite shows of all time. And I think before 24, nobody really knew how to do a high octane action show on TV, except for Glenn Gordon Caron. The only episodes he directed were the first three, and they are masterfully directed and paced compared to pretty much anything you were watching on TV back in 1999. I mean, but again, I'll get to that in my discussion. But what is Now and Again? And I would tell people at the time, and I swear to God, I mean this as a compliment. I swear on my life, this is meant to be complimentary, even though I don't think she'll think it's complimentary because she thinks everyone's out to get her. And that's, if you sat at Devin Grayson down and said, create the X-Files for 1999, she would have given us this show. And I know what you're asking is, who the fuck is Devin Grayson? I'm like, ask Megan Fitzmartin. God, I wanted to use that line for a while. But it's essentially about a guy who is, let me do my Glenn chin stroke thing. He does this a lot in interviews. I watched a lot of this guy being interviewed for the preparation for this thing I'm doing. It's about a guy who dies in a pretty horrific way. His life, he has a wonderful wife, he has a wonderful daughter. Professional life is falling apart. And then he dies in what's literally one of the worst ways anybody can die, but in a way that pretty much erases any trace of his physical form. And he wakes up, his brain is basically attached to a computer. And a man comes up to him and says, the United States government has made the most perfect human specimen. And yes, and that specimen is the mayor from Nashville. Nashville was Nashville was over a decade after this show came out, but I always Eric Close, who strikes me as as a guy who would think that was funny. But the man tells him, we want to put your brain, we need a brain to put in the body. He says the strength of the athleticism, John Morton, the grace of Fred Astaire, strength, power. Basically, he's a super soldier. He's Captain America, this body, played by actor Eric Close. And this scientist, played by Dennis Haysbert, in which you want to talk about 24. And you listen to Haysbert talk about this role. I definitely feel that for Mr. Haysbert and Close, I definitely feel, hearing them talk about it on the DVD extras, which I'll also eventually get to, they really loved doing this show, the both of them. They really thought Caron gave them some of their best material that they've ever had to perform. And if you're a fan of Mr. Haysbert, this is a role that, put it this way, It's not David Palmer. It's not. What's fascinating is probably one of the most fascinating. Now, Dan Yankee's about a Faustian pact. The character he's playing is more of a Dr. Frankenstein type, but he's also what's interesting. He's the villain, and he's also a moral man. He's a man who believes in patriotism, believes in the right thing, but he also believes in the rules. And the man he chooses, Michael Wiseman, to become this super soldier, Michael Newman, is a man who immediately starts trying to break those rules any way possible. Because even though he's been told he can't contact his former life, that's all that goes into his mind. And I think what's weird about Close's performance on the show is I think it's a good performance with what he's given, but I often think what he's given diminishes the character, if that makes sense. A lot of but I'm going to get into that as we go on. And at the same time that all this is happening, his wife and daughter, played by Margaret Cullen, an actress who never got her due, who really never got her due, and I've heard rumors as to why that is. And if that rumor is true, that's a stupid reason why she never got her due. And Heather Matarazzo, which is an actor I don't like Todd Solondz, okay? But it's also there's another actor on the show that is not on the DVD extras. I mean, he's retired for looks like to be 15 years, and that's Garrett Graham. And this is really the last long-term work he did before what looks to be like a couple guest shots in retirement. But veteran character actor, brilliant in Robert Zemeckis' Used Cars. And he's actually really gone on this show, and he does some really good work, and nobody remembers it. Nobody saw it. You know, but that's what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to make you want to watch now and again, but I want you to understand that it is a show that will delight and frustrate you in equal measure. And I think you should watch stuff that makes you mad and makes you happy at the same time. It's an interesting way. And it's there's some very interesting actors and plots and very much fly by the sea of plotting. And it ends on a massive cliffhanger, so they weren't sure they were going to get renewed. And at the time, doing a science fiction show and shooting in New York was absurdly expensive. Absurdly expensive. There was a little chance they were going to get renewed unless they moved the production, and I don't think Glenn Gordon Caron would have stood for that. I also think there's a very other plausible reason the show was canceled, and Glenn Gordon Caron will not be happy when I explain what that is. If he cares at all what I think, which he shouldn't. He's got more money than me, and he created this show, which makes him better creator than me. But again, I think that's the wonderful contrast of Glenn Gordon Caron. He's kind of like Joe Straczynski. I cry when Babylon 5 explodes, but I also read some of the stories I've heard about him as a collaborator and think he is basically actual Lando Malari before before the shadow, before he met Morden. But that's another story. And I'm not going to do Babylon 5. Or am I? So now and again, a show you should watch, a show that will drive you crazy, a show that you will love and hate in equal measure. But what drew me to it at the time was The X-Files was pretty much going through a massive creative collapse. I really think Chris Carter might be one of the worst writers to ever do it. And the less he had seemed to have less and less control or interest in what he was doing on that show. So I was looking for another spy action show. And I had to wait until 24 came along and maybe realized, why the F? Oh, but I stuck with X-Files to the end because I'm an idiot. But at the time, now and again, there are scenes in the Now and Again pilot that you would not see ever in an American show today. Caron comes up with something I found. Caron, but like, what's interesting is like a lot of the times you think there's a bigger story going on, but the irony of Now and Again is I thought like eventually a bigger story was going on than what I was watching, and it turned out no, that's not how it was working for anybody. That that writer's room was very fly by the seat of his pants. In fact, there is an episode of the show, and it comes fairly early on, that is a shot for shot, and that's not a joke, shot for shot remake of an episode of The Prisoner. I mean, when I saw it at the time, I'm like, oh yeah, I get this trick. And a year after that, I watched The Prisoner for the first time, and I was like, he just copied this. I mean, when Person of Interest copied The Prisoner, they at least tried to make it interesting. When Glenn Gordon Caron did it, he was like, I need to fill 45 minutes. And that's the other interesting thing. If Caron is to be believed, head idiot Les Moonves, and Les Moonves is an idiot. I think that's pretty much canon now. Like the only thing he ever did that was smart was hire Chuck Lorre to make. But you listen to an interview with Chuck Lorre. Chuck Lorre knows how to actually make successful television, pretty much more than anybody in this business. And if you don't believe me, go watch Georgie and Mandy's First Marriage. But that's probably the smartest thing Les Moonves ever did, was let Chuck Lorre do whatever the F he wanted. But Les Moonves came to Caron for some bizarre reason and said, I will let you do whatever you want, but you have to do 22 episodes, which, believe it or not, at that point, he had never done. The longest season of Moonlighting was only 18 episodes. And even with this, you get the pressure, you see the pressure on Caron to hit that 22 episode number. And the fact that they so blatantly copied The Prisoner for an episode, I mean, it's not like, I mean, this is 1999. I couldn't go on Amazon Prime and say, here's where he stole from an episode of The Prisoner. That's not how it was done back then. But I watched The Prisoner for the first time, and I've seen other shows like Person of Interest ripped off The Prisoner in its final season. The same episode Caron ripped off, but they actually tried to make it somewhat unique. That's not what Caron did there, and I'm genuinely embarrassed for everyone involved. But that's a story we're going to get to. But in the next couple weeks, I'm going to start reviewing it episode by episode, taking a few tangents, and hopefully you'll enjoy the ride. And I will hopefully have a review of the first episode up by the weekend. Talk to you later.